Welcome to Real Stories MKE, brought to you as part of Exfabula's mission to connect Milwaukee through real stories. I'm Kim Shine.
And I'm Joel Dresang. Exfabula believes that everyone has personal stories worth sharing. Exfabula hosts storytelling workshops to help community members build storytelling skills and confidence. And Exfabula holds story slams, where real stories get shared on stage. In this episode, we're bringing you 4 of those powerful stories.
Yeah, that's right. And this season of Real Stories MKE is presented by Christine Simchich and Jim McNulty. Thank you guys so much. And our theme this episode, the final episode of season 6, is power. Now, some people may immediately view this as physical strength or, in current times, as political action. But power is an ability that we can all have, attain, feel, lose, and even exert over others. Its presence can come from within, from a stranger, or even an unknown source. Now, ultimately, power is a responsibility, and in my opinion, it's best used to connect, inspire, problem solve, and learn. Our first power story is from Antoine Carter. Quoting Bruce Lee, he talks about the shape of water when poured into a cup and how the power of bias has impacted his own ability to flow into his natural state. Now, Antoine shared this story at the Power, Dissent, and Youth Empowerment Slam in 2017. Here's Antoine.
I'm a black man. Yeah, right? As a black man, something you may not know, I'm a big quote guy. The mighty Bruce Lee once said, "You put water in a cup, it becomes a cup. You put water in a bottle, it becomes a bottle. You put water in a teacup, and it becomes a teacup." What I've learned in my life is, as a black man, it's really hard to be like water because there's so many boxes that people want to put you in. I'll give you an example. I am born in Harambe, but for about 25 years, I've been a product of 53206, right? Boxes. Everybody just put me in a box, right? And so you realize that even as a young kid, that as a black man, there are limits. And you can't really go out that box without trouble, without some sort of doubt, whether it's you, your character, whether it's your blackness, all that stuff. As a kid, I went to Spanish immersion. I could have went to any normal school. My mom actually found that in a phone book, actually. But growing up, Spanish immersion was like an affluent school with kids whose dads were pitching coaches for the Brewers and, city folks who have really important jobs at City Hall and all this stuff. And me and my black friends, we caught the bus there from our houses in Harambe. And there was always this box that they tried to put you in, the free lunch box, the you play basketball box, the tú no sabes español box. As you continue to grow older, those boxes change, but they're still just as limiting. As you get older, living in 53206, internally, you want to continue to strive for greatness, but don't read books. You want to pursue goals, but grab a ball, man. Grab a sack. That's what my friends in the neighborhood told me. Because the box for them was selling drugs because they didn't care about school. Their parents didn't really support them. I was blessed to have a mom and a dad who loved me. So that hopefully removes another box. Trying to strive to go to college. When I graduated from Riverside, I wanted to go to St. John's. I wanted to go to UCLA. But even at that time, I started to fall more into that box, and I didn't even apply. And then as you get older, you see that in Milwaukee, the jobs aren't really available like that. You got to wear a suit and shit. Sorry, I'm cussing a lot. But you still have to keep on trying. You still have to define your own box. So as I got older, I really, really, really wanted to be like that quote I said earlier. I wanted to be like water. But even then, you still, as you're finding your way, you still have to duck those boxes, and they're everywhere. It's like getting pulled over by the police officer. Got to stay away from the box before you get shot, right? One time, I was pulled over, and my friend, who was a drug dealer at the time, the police told him that, man, this is hard. If your baby mama don't show us her breast, we're going to take you to jail. Because he thought we were in those boxes. And even as I've like grown professionally, my job is I help people start gardens. I'm still put in the box. Niggas don't grow food. You ain't Will Allen. Nice, 1 minute. But what I've learned is, even as you continue to grow, boxes are they're just something you have to deal with. And so when I came to this exhibit and I saw Antoine's organ, I immediately identified with that box. And even though in the center of that box is a beautiful piano, I've seen videos where the gentleman plays songs of rage. And I feel like that too. Even as a guy who's still doing work, trying to get out of those boxes, I go to work, and I'm the only Black guy in my office of environmental folks. And a gentleman shows up, and doesn't know where he's going, doesn't know who he is, who he's looking for. And I ask him if he needs help, and he's like, "No, man, I want to talk to them. You don't have to be security." Another box. And so my question is, when can I be water? Thank you.
That was Antoine Carter.
Our next power story comes from Heather Hingston. Heather shares her journey confronting her eating disorder and how a higher power intervened. She told this story in 2012 at an X-Fabulous Story Slam with the theme Saves the Day. Here's Heather.
I went to grad school to become a marriage and family therapist. I really like people. All of my friends think I give really great advice. Maybe I would figure out something about my weird family. It'll be great. But I got so much more than what I signed up for. At the time, that was in the fall of 2008. And at the time, I was in the trenches of a pretty intense battle with bulimia. I was very, very sick. But I had told a story about my life as long as I can remember, that I was fine. And not just that I was fine, that I had it under control, that I could handle this. So I started grad school anyway, even though lots of people were concerned, and I probably shouldn't have, but I was fine. So I started, and 2 months into the program, I was sitting in a class called EAT, which is ironic. And it stood for Emotions, Attachments, and Traumas. And my professor asked us to make 2 lists. The first list was the list of values that we said we held, so the story that we told. And the second was, if no one could talk to you in just watch you, what would be the values they would say? What's the story they would tell? And do they match? And obviously, mine didn't. I was living this huge lie, full of shame and secrets, and it was staring me in the face, and I couldn't deny it. And I couldn't ask people to sit in front of me and ask for help and change if I wasn't willing to do that. So by God's grace, I got the courage and asked my professor for help, and that week I started treatment. And you fast forward 2 years, and I am done with grad school. Yay! I'm a therapist, and I'm healthy, right? Nope. I'm healthier, and I was healthier, but the story, the mask that I had been wearing for so long was falling apart. And I was fine on the outside, but on the inside, I was a wreck. But God's patient and knows me better than I do and knew where to find me, which happened to be outside my bathroom one fall day. I had binged that day. My roommates were all gone, and I was home alone, and I had binged. And just a side note, bulimia is a binge purge cycle, and anorexia is different, but they're both very deadly, and we should educate ourselves because they're an epidemic. But I had binged and was frantically pacing my house because I was in this part of my treatment where this isn't the story that I wanted. And I knew that, but I didn't know anything else. I didn't know what else to do. And so I'm like pacing my house, like trying to remember all the jargon. My therapist had said, like, ride the wave. And I was like, that's not helping. So I'm like in and out of my bathroom and my hallway and my bedroom. And I am in my bathroom at one point, and I'm thinking, do I just do this again? Do I just start over? I'll get it right. But I wasn't getting it right, and I wasn't going to. And I stepped out of the bathroom into the hallway, and at this point, I had written myself into this corner, so to speak. I had typecasted myself in my own life, that I didn't have a choice of what to do or what not to do. This is what I knew and trusted. But I came face to face with a choice for the first time in that hallway, and that was to live or to continue dying, metaphorically and literally. And how I make sense of this moment in my head, this relationship that started, is with a metaphor, and I love metaphors. I am in this vast ocean, and the waves are crashing, and I'm treading water, and God's above me and is like, hey, Heather, stop treading. And I'm like, no, I've got this right. I'm fine, thank you. Thanks for your concern. Appreciate it. This is fun. And he's like, no, trust me, Heather. Just stop. And I'm like, okay, see, most people, they just keep walking when you give them the spiel. They don't want to really help you clean up this huge mess. But he didn't keep walking. And I'm like, no, you don't get it, do you? I'm doing this. All of this is so I stay afloat. I'm surviving. If I stop this, I'll drown. I'll die. And he gets right on my level and is like, I know. That's the point. I'll save you. And so I'm in this hallway, treading water, terrified, because I don't know what to do. My story is it. That's all I know. It's all I trust. And I don't know anything about this God, Christ. Nothing. I know nothing. But I step towards my room anyway, terrified out of my mind. And I get into my room and I get in bed and I just cry. Harder and harder, because I'm so scared, because I am not in control of this anymore. I'm not writing this part anymore, and I don't know how this will end. And I wish I could say that I woke up the next day and it was like sunshine and puppy dogs, but it wasn't. I still felt fat and exhausted, but it was different, and that's true, and I couldn't explain why it was different. But it was different because I wasn't writing the story anymore. And you fast forward 2 years, two of the hardest years of my life, I would say, but more joyous than I could have ever come up with on my own. And I'm standing in front of lots of people on a stage telling them a very personal story. And I get to tell them that bulimia is not a part of that story anymore. And that's really cool. And it's because every day I have to choose not to pick up that pen and write the story that I think will be cool or the one I know, but to trust the one he writes for me instead. Because the difference between my story and God's story is that mine wants me to be okay desperately, and that's great. But his doesn't just want me to be okay, his makes me better every day. Thanks.
That was Heather Hingston. Hey, Kim, let's do some ultra shorts.
I would like to do that.
Okay, these are those little stories that people share on slips of paper, and MCs read them at our events. Do you have one?
I do. This is from Lauren. Lauren says, I wore a back brace when I was in middle school, and often other kids would ask me about it and try to make fun of it, but I would just tell them what it's for and how it was helping me, and I realized if I'm not ashamed of it, then they don't have any power.
Here's an ultra short from Jean. My superpower is servicing people and helping people in need.
Come on, Jean. This is from Anonymous. I learned the importance of being honest with others and myself. It's time to speak my own truth. It's time to feel empowered. I am worth it.
This is also from Anonymous. When I was in grade school, my best friend and I would pretend we were vampires with magical powers. And at recess, we would use those powers on people. And then parenthetically, it says, no children were injured.
We've got a third story about power, and this time it's from Christine Reardon. She explains how the power of strangers helped shield her from an unsavory character in New York City, and how that moment has guided her life to this day. She told this in April 2024 at After Dark for the Culture, a collaboration between Exfabula and Hyphen, a Radio Milwaukee station. Here's Christine.
I'm not from around here. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and this is a story about the moment I decided who I wanted to be when I grew up. And I thought about this recently. A photograph was taken of me, and I looked at that photograph, and I'm like, I became that person I decided I wanted to be at 14 years old. So I grew up in Brooklyn, but I got into a fancy high school in Manhattan, and I had to take the subway to school. And I had only just turned 14 when I was starting high school, so there's little old 14-year-old me. Imagine me a couple inches shorter, about half as wide, with the emotional maturity of maybe an 11-year-old. And I'm on the subway by myself in New York City during rush hour, and there is this creepy old man. And he is reaching out. And he wants to touch me. Now realize, 11-year-old brain, 14-year-old girl, 11-year-old brain is like, what is wrong with this man? I don't know what he wants to do. I don't know why he's reaching out for me. It didn't make sense to me until many years later. But there he was, this creepy old man reaching out to me. And so I moved away. And he comes closer, and he's reaching out, and I move away again. But there's only so far you can move in the subway in New York City during rush hour. Like, there's no place to go. There's, 30,000 other people in that little car with you. So there's a pole, and I'm moving around the pole. And he keeps coming, and he's going to touch me. And so it's relevant that this is 1988. And the reason that's relevant is because the TV show A Different World had just come out. Do you remember that? Yeah, from The Cosby Show, Denise went off to college. And on that show was a lot of black female professional women. You know the ones, they stood up really tall. They had the shoulder pads in their suits. Their suits were bright colors, and they had those kind of stern faces, but you could tell they loved you anyway. So there I am on the subway, and there's this creepy little guy trying to touch me, and I don't understand what's going on, and I'm moving back, and out of nowhere, these 3 women from Central Casting for a Different World came out, and they form a wall between me and this man. And before I go any further, I want you to know that this is a true story. This is my truth. This is how I truly remember this true story. That being said, if you want to argue that it's not factual, that's okay. Because these 3 women stare at that man. They look at him and they stare at him, and he begins to shrink. And they keep staring, and he gets smaller, and he gets smaller, and he gets so small that he turns into a rat and scampers away. And this is a true story. And then the women disappear. I don't know. It's really crowded. I look around. I want to say thank you. At least that's how I was raised. I'm looking around, and I want to say thank you, and I can't see them. They are gone. So I continue on to school. I get off. But here's the thing. That was the day that this mixed kid, raised by a white woman in a white neighborhood, with contact with, but not regular, with my dad's family, this was the time that I sort of understood what it was to be one of those women from a different world, and to be strong, and to be smart, and to be educated, and to be a protector. And that is when I learned that that's who I wanted to be when I grew up. And last October, I looked at a picture of myself, and I saw that I had become her. Thank you.
That was Christine Reardon, and we have an update
Oh,
from
good.
her.
I like updates.
Me too. She said that story was my first time as a teller with Exfabula and my second time ever telling a story in public. Since then, I have been a teller twice more at For the Culture events because it was such a wonderful experience.
Good to hear. Our final power story comes from Patricia Rosenberg. This one shows the power of pranks, laughter, a bit of the mystical realm, and ultimately, love. Patricia shared this story at a 2020 Exfabula Story Slam with the theme, In My Mind. Here's Patricia.
In my mind, I am psychic, and I had my husband convinced of this. We met at this huge New Year's Eve party in the 80s, actually, and I walked up to him, and I look at him, and I go, you look like your name could be Stan. And he's like, oh, my God. And I was friends with his sister, and he looked like his sister with a mustache, so, this is no big surprise. So, anyway, and so then Stan and I start talking, and we were eating his chili con queso dip when I fell in love immediately with the dip. And then Stan and I talked for 3 hours, and we became friends, and a couple years later, we were married. And he had this thing, because I'm a social worker, and I grew up on the Southwest Side, one of 12 kids, so I can read people. That's what I do for a living. And so Stan, he was really shy, so he really saw me as being a brilliant, because I could figure people out. And so he would have me, first one time something happened, his sister was dying early when we were just engaged, and his older sister, and I knew her well, and we expected her to live a couple more weeks. And I woke up one day and I said, Stan, get to the hospital. I just know you have to get to the hospital. And he got to the hospital, and he got to see her. She died a few hours later. And then Stan would use me to hire people. He was a manufacturer of trophies, and I was consequently a trophy wife. And so Stan he used me. He hired this guy, and I met him, and I said, this guy's bad news, Stan. He goes, I can't get rid of him. I'm telling you, he's bad news. Well, the guy robbed him blind. I mean, thousands of dollars out the door of trophy, of metal that's valuable. So anyway, Stan always thought I was psychic after that, and then it was in the 90s, and I have 2 little kids at home, and Stan is working like crazy, and cell phones had just come out, and he was butt dialing me. Now, this is before we even knew what butt dialing was. You know, my phone kept ringing, and I'm picking up the phone, and there he is, and I put it down again, and I'm trying to take care of kids. I'm getting so mad, and I couldn't call him back because his phone is in his butt. So, you know, and I'm like, oh, God. And so finally, I get the kids to bed, and this is the day we're driving his Bronco, and I'm watching OJ, and then Stan Buck calls me, and I still don't know what happened to OJ, and so so Stan calls me, and I hear him, and I hang up, and then I get on the landline, and I call him up, and I go, honey, you know how you think that maybe I could be psychic? Well, I think I just had a vision. Are you standing in the laser room talking to Eric about Tina's insurance? And he goes, oh my God. Oh my, I'm coming home. You know, he comes home, and I tell him, I go, you know, and he was like, so he's still mad at me, you know. He was like so mad at me. So anyway, so that was the beginning of like our thing. So 20 years later, I get this thing in my head. I'm a social worker, and I said, Stan, we have to talk about signing do not resuscitate orders. And that is, you know, if not to revive you or not, if you stop breathing. And I tell him that I had a patient who, his wife, she tried to resuscitate him in the night after he was brain dead, and he now had an IQ of a 3-year-old. And I said, Stan goes, I don't want you ever to resuscitate me, take me no matter what. And I said, well, I want to be. I don't want to be. So he goes, I want you to, And I said, Stan, I said, this guy's like a 3-year-old. He goes, I'm already like a 3-year-old. And I said, all right. And I said, and then he goes, and I'm going to bed now, and you can't sleep with me anymore because you're not going to save my life. And so anyway, so the next day, I go to work, and I get a call from work, and it's my son, Matthew. And Matthew goes, Mom, we have a problem. Stan's partner's trying to reach you. They can't reach you. And I knew then that Stan was gone. Stan died of a sudden heart attack, and I felt it, and I knew. And what it tells me is that love is psychic.
That was Patricia Rosenberg.
And this is our last episode of the season. I am so sad about that, Joel.
Yeah, I know. This is so fun.
Yeah, and I actually have to say, I was telling you this before, I think that this is one of my favorite seasons.
One of your 6 favorites?
Yes, one of my 6 favorites. And hopefully you guys feel the same. But don't worry if you're a little sad, because Exfabula has been at this since 2009, and there's more audio and more video stories at exfabula.org.
That Exfabula website lists upcoming storytelling workshops and story slams, so you can make plans to work on your storytelling and maybe even put your name in the hat. You can also connect with Exfabula on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. And you can listen to more Real Stories MKE wherever you get podcasts.
Thank you guys so much, everybody who makes this program possible, including Exfabula staff, storytellers, and audio engineer Sam Woods.
Thanks, Sam.
We also want to thank our producer, Jordan Terry, and the Exfabula funders who support, including the Charles E. Kubley Foundation, Copyright Magazine, and Camp Pack.
For Real Stories MKE, I'm Joel Driesang.
And I'm Kim Shine. Don't forget, everybody has stories to tell, so please consider telling yours, and thank you for listening.